Good evening and welcome to the Indiana University Cinema's virtual screening room. I'm Brittany Friesner, the cinema's interim director. Please note that tonight's event will feature live automatic captioning, and to turn on captions, you'll want to move your mouse to the toolbar at the bottom of your screen, click on live transcript, then click show subtitle. If you have any issues accessing this feature, please feel free to ask a question using the Q&A box, which is also at the bottom of your Zoom screen. To begin tonight's program, IU Cinema wishes to acknowledge and honor the Indigenous communities native to this region and recognize that Indiana University is built upon Indigenous homelands and resources. We recognize the Mi'kmaq, the Lenape, the Borewadmeek, and the Sawanwa peoples as the past, present, and future caretakers of this land. We ask you to reflect on the lives and histories of the Indigenous communities from where you are watching tonight as well. Further, we implore you to not only be aware of the history of the Indigenous peoples of where you are and the historic trauma caused by colonialism around the world, we also encourage you each to learn about the ongoing atrocities many Indigenous communities still face, including living without clean water and having their lands annexed for pipelines. We appreciate you joining us this evening for this virtual edition of our monthly movie roundup with our A Place for Film bloggers. We had so much fun with the inaugural version of this event that we decided it would be the best way to close out our spring 2021 season. If you're not familiar with our blog, I highly encourage you to dive in and explore at blogs.iu.edu/aplaceforfilm. We'll also be sharing this URL in the chat. We premiered the A Place for Film blog in October 2016 to further engage our audiences with quality, relevant, interesting, and sometimes provocative writing about programs related to IU Cinema. Nearly a year into the blog, in September 2017, we launched the monthly movie roundup as a way to go beyond the boundaries of IU Cinema's current programming and offer a peek inside the personal and eclectic tastes of our bloggers while still reflecting the spirit of the cinema's varied programming. The format of tonight's program will be an extended conversation between our A Place for Film bloggers, moderated by IU Cinema Publications editor, Michaela Owens. And after about 45 minutes, we'll begin answering your audience questions. Please feel free to type your questions in the Q&A box at any time. Michaela Owens is the editor of A Place for Film, in addition to being IU Cinema's publications editor. As an IU graduate, she holds a bachelor's in communication and culture and a master's in cinema and media studies. She has also been a volunteer usher at IU Cinema since 2016. Michaela never stops thinking about classic Hollywood, thanks to her mother's introduction to it, and she likes to believe she is an expert on Katharine Hepburn and Esther Williams. And speaking of Esther Williams, I want to take the opportunity to thank Michaela for programming Easy to Love, starring the extraordinary Esther Williams, as her spring 2020 staff selects pick, which turned out to be the last film I was able to enjoy fully in the IU Cinema, and truly an incredibly fun last experience to have before this long intermission we've been on. Please join me in welcoming Michaela Owens.
Hello. And first of all, thank you for letting me program Easy to Love. And thank you to everyone for joining us this evening. The monthly movie roundup was an idea that came from one of our original contributors, Nate Sexton, and it's been really great every month to find out what everyone's been watching and to sometimes learn about films I personally have never heard of. We loved sharing this written feature as a virtual event in December, and I know we're all really excited to do it again tonight. So let's meet the bloggers. David Carter is a co-founder of Cicada Cinema, as well as a co-host and producer of A Place for Film, the IU Cinema podcast. I like to joke that he's my arch enemy, but it's not a joke. David's love of film ranges from Speed Racer to The Holy Mountain to Do the Right Thing to everything far away and in between. Laura Ivins loves stop motion, home movies, imperfect films, nature hikes, and Stephen Crane's poetry. She has a PhD from Indiana University and an MFA from Boston University. In addition to watching and writing about movies, sometimes she also makes them. Jack Miller enjoys the films of Howard Hawks, Jacques Tourneur, and John Ford. He graduated from Indiana University with a BA in English and currently resides in Chicago. And Jesse Pasternack is a graduate of IU, where he was co-president of the Indiana Student Cinema Guild. He's an aspiring professional writer-director. His own film work has appeared at Campus Movie Fest and the Anthology Film Archives in New York City. Hi, everyone.
Hey. Hey.
All right, so I know we're all itching to talk to each other about these films, so we're just gonna dive on in. And of course, up first, we're going to show the trailer for David's choice, which will not surprise any of you if you know David, Magic Mike XXL.
I got a little treat for y'all tonight. We're gonna see if he still got some magic in that mic.
Tomorrow, start the pilgrimage to Myrtle Beach for the convention.
I wish we had known you guys back in our day.
Well, I'd say it's still your day, man.
I mean, if this really is our last ride, what if we make up some new routine?
This game is evolve or die. Are you ready to be worshipped? Are you ready to be exalted?
What are we?
We're like healers or something. Yes, man.
Oh, yeah.
It's not bro time, it's show time. Are you guys ready?
Such a subtle trailer. um, so, David, why did you pick this film, and when will we be seeing your audition to join the Kings of Tampa?
Woo!
You've already got the outfit, I can tell.
Oh, I mean, look, I had to come dressed for the occasion. Oh, why did I pick this film? Well, this film is very important to me. This came out in 2015, which was, I would say, a pivotal summer in my life. One, for cinema. This is the summer of what I would say is my last favorite Pixar movie, Inside Out. It's also the summer of the only now half-cursed Man from U.N.C.L.E., underrated Jim. It's also the summer of two little action movies called Mission Impossible Fallout and Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, and then Mad Max Fury Road. And this was also the summer in which I was the brokest I have been in my entire life. I think at one point I had $20 to my name. And so because of that, I would spend the summer essentially breaking into AMC 12 and watching movies for free all summer. Or having friends who would take pity on me and pay for my movie tickets. But I picked this movie in particular because the night I saw this movie with my boys, I would say this is one of the, for a movie theater that maybe had like 20 people in it, this movie was not a big hit because it was coming off of a movie that is very sad and depressing, and they shifted course very hard on this movie. Probably one of the most rapturous experiences I've ever seen from a small audience. I remember watching this movie at the AMC 12. There was like a group of what I will assume are women between the age of like 30 and 50. And I just remember in the final sequence in this movie, the fantasia of desire and satisfaction that is this convention. When they play that Duel of the Fates remix when the boys come out on stage, I just remember this one lady like almost half standing up, pumping her arms, like fully just rapturous at what she had just seen, like what was about to come, essentially. And it's on top of just that theater experience, I think it's one of the more underrated movies of the 2010s I think it's this cross-genre road movie, secret musical. There are no external conflicts in this movie. Everything is internal. I think this is the peak of Channing Tatum's career, sadly, in my opinion, because I think he's one of our last like great leading men, like actual like A-list like leading men. You go see a movie to go see Channing Tatum, the charming potato himself. Uh, this was like his year. Like you had Jupiter Ascending, which obviously I'm in the bag for, and then you had his like pivotal role in Hateful Eight when it stops being an Agatha Christie mystery and turns into like a Paul Verhoeven movie for the last like 30 minutes of it. And I think this movie just does not like get enough respect. Like it's like so criminally underrated as far as like what I would consider a modern musical, which I can explain like my thesis on that. But it's also just this incredibly horny movie. I'm just gonna say it. It's a horny movie, and I picked it because people are getting fully vaccinated. People are emerging from their homes like the cicadas from the ground. And if you partake in that life, be it casually or seriously, intimately, whatever, I think this is like a great movie to watch and like feel like sex isn't this like scary thing. It's such a like positive force in this movie. And it's such a great movie. You know, it's a great movie in what I call the what's better than this guys being dudes canon. It's an integral part of the dudes rock canon. Is just a lot of positive male influence in this movie. And I'm a big Steven Soderbergh fan, even though he did not direct this movie. He's directed this movie. He still edited and shot it, and you can clearly tell it looks like a Steven Soderbergh movie. But Gregory Jacobs is the assistant director on the first Magic Mike, did a wonderful job. The dance sequences are incredible. Like I said, I love Channing Tatum. This is as close to a Gene Kelly movie as we're going to get in the 21st century, in my opinion. As a matter of fact, there are a lot of like interesting parallels to something like Singing in the Rain in this movie. And then, you know, it's also just kind of a movie about people who are kind of like dumb and handsome, like realizing their dreams, and like how desire like intersects with the things that they like want to do. Like they're like objects of desire, and like how they integrate that into their own art. And for a movie that's like not very like, you know, like plotty at all, like there's really no plot to this movie, they just go to a convention, it's probably one of the better screenplays I've ever seen from a movie. Things pay off, like are set up and pay off, like dominoes are toppled. And so that is why I brought Magic Mike XXL to the monthly movie roundup, and to tell a story about Britney later.
That's all right. It's also, if you just want to watch it as a straight comedy, you could do that. I forgot how funny this movie was until I rewatched it a couple of days ago. Like I always remember the Backstreet Boys moment as, yes, of course, A+ cinema.
Yeah.
But like the rest of it's just really funny, as well as being very thoughtful and reminding us that hot people have feelings too.
Hot, dumb people have feelings. There's a great distinction there, because I wouldn't call anyone in this movie, none of the men in this movie, smart, but they are nice and hot. It's a group of himbos, to put it in the parlance of the day.
What could be better?
What could be better? What's better than this?
I saw another Soderbergh joint, Ocean's 11, just 2 weeks ago on 35mm at the Music Box here in Chicago, and which was kind of a trip. And similarly, it like is so funny, and I didn't remember that about it either. And also kind of a eulogy to like the final era of male movie stars in Hollywood. Which
do you think that last shot where they're looking at the fireworks is an homage to Ocean's 11?
I think that's like, I think so, because Steven Soderbergh's kind of cute like that. Like, I don't know, like Logan Lucky has like Ocean's 11's references in it. And like, once again, I know he didn't direct this movie, but his influence is like all over it. But yeah, I think I would call that a direct callback to, because I mean, even in a sense, like it's kind of the same emotional like catharsis, like they pulled this thing off that they've been wanting to do this entire movie. But whereas that's Debussy, this is DJ Khaled and Ludacris and whatever. Like this is all I do is win, one of the great songs of the 2010s.
Wonder if Soderbergh movies are secretly like Jacques Demy movies where they all take place in like the same cinematic universe.
Oh God, I wish. I would love to see the characters from like Ocean's 11 pop up and be underneath or something. Like, I don't know, that just be, or Kafka-esque characters pop up and things.
That would be a very weird cinematic world.
Yeah, Che Guevara pops up in Ocean's 11.
Or they could have a
videotape.
They could have a buddy comedy between Che Guevara and the Matt Damon character from The Informant.
That's a mashup.
That is a mashup. But yeah, I brought this because we were doing the musical series on the IE Cinema podcast right now, and if me and Elizabeth were to each get a pick, I knew if I were to bring it, I would do this as my pick as a non-traditional musical. And you know, there are other musicals on the program tonight, and so I just thought it would be interesting to have this be a part of that lineage, just because like while no one, well, a couple of people sing in the movie. Donald Glover sings, Matt Bomer sings. It's mostly through dance, but it has the same rules as a musical, which there really are no rules in musicals, but generally like things are sung or danced when like characters are reaching like an emotional peak, or like to make something like concrete that is an abstract emotion. Like, you know, the I Want song, you know, there's an I Want song in like lots of musicals. The I Want song in this movie is when Pony gets cued on. I mean, the like make 'em laugh sequence to reference Singing in the Rain is when Joe Manganiello dances to I Want It That Way at the gas station, like literally trying to make a woman smile. Like, it's, I don't know, I don't think I've heard it get talked in that way before. And so I'd just be curious to hear like framing it that way, if you guys would like agree or disagree with that.
Yeah, no, I could see that. You make a lot of good points. Now I'm just thinking about Matt Bomer singing, because I love Matt Bomer and that was fantastic.
I mean, singing one of the great sexiest songs of all time, Untitled, How Does It Feel? D'Angelo. I mean, in a movie just filled with nothing but good needle drops, in my opinion. So yeah, I don't know. And I just think the cast of this movie is incredible. I would legitimately have nominated Joe Manganiello for Best Supporting Actor this year. I would have definitely nominated Jada Pinkett Smith, who has to come into this movie and replace Matthew McConaughey from the first movie, as he's about to enter the McConaissance in these two series of an actor at this point to do the sequel to the first Magic Mike, which has this like real, if you've never seen it, which is one of the big points I want to get to this movie, you don't really need to have seen the first Magic Mike to watch this movie. All the way down to whole characters are dropped and you never hear about them in name ever again. It's also just a completely different tone of a movie. It's very like Panic at Needle Park-esque, like drug drama, like, and kind of makes sex and drugs this like weird icky thing, as opposed to like the fun and positive things that it is in this movie. It so quickly establishes its own world. Like, I don't know, it reminds me a lot of the John Wick series, where it's like there's this whole world where it's like, why are strippers like the most important part of, they have their own underground system and economy, and people talk about Magic Mike like he's some legend that like Mike Lane like saved the world by stripping one day. But then at the same time, you're like, well, this is like the Juicy Justice League at a certain extent. Like, they go around like satisfying women like all the time. And yeah, and unlike the first movie, like, this is a positive version of like, give the audience what they want. And like, this movie gives you like these like sweet, dumb stripper boys just slapping meat together. And like, that is what we want.
Although what my mom wanted was more Matthew McConaughey.
I know there's a whole season of True Detective. You got those Lincoln car commercials.
All right, so let's move on to our next pick, because I know David could turn this whole thing into...
I could easily talk about. I took like 3 hours worth of notes on here.
All right, start your own podcast on that. Okay, so up next we have Laura's pick, The Whole Story.
It looked like blue open water, and I thought that was kind of odd.
Every time I drive by there, I just automatically, it's reflex action. I look over there.
I've never seen anything like it in 89 years.
How can you have a hole, just wide open water, with no streams, no river, no nothing running into it, that last week was 3 feet of ice? What's going on?
This week, we traveled to the frigid birthplace of Paul Bunyan to get to the bottom of a small town phenomenon that's slowly being woven into the fabric of American legend. Join me as we unravel Minnesota's very own provincial puzzler. I've been pitching the show to cable channels for years, and when I heard about this beautiful story, I just decided, I couldn't wait any longer, and I'm going to make the pilot episode myself. So that's why we came out here and,
Well, I told them that it ain't open no more.
What's
There
not
ain't no open water.
What's not open?
The lake.
It's frozen over?
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I told them when they called that it was froze over.
Oh, I didn't know. Do you have any suggestions on how we can do a story on the hole if the hole doesn't exist? So maybe we put the camera there so it's facing this way.
Exactly. The more deeply you dig into this, the more puzzling it becomes.
This show is all I have, and I'm not going to go home empty-handed. And you need to understand that.
This is not really a hole in the ice. It is the black hole.
The biggest hole that I've seen develop out of this thing is the hole in mankind.
Now, we are all going to die. Everyone in this room is going to die. But there's one way we can all live forever, and that's by leaving a mark behind. And by solving this mystery, we have a golden opportunity not only to leave a mark behind, but to leave a legend that could be even taller than Mr. Paul Bunyan.
So who's gonna solve this mystery?
All right, Laura, so tell us about the whole story.
Yeah, so I first saw this film when it was initially released. I was a graduate student at Boston University, and Alex Karpovsky brought the film to one of our cinematics. The critic that ran our cinematech, Jerry Perry, he's like friends with Karpovsky and actually did the commentary on the DVD with Karpovsky. So he was able to bring him out and we got to do a Q&A. So first of all, the film was, I'm really fascinated by films that like play with reality, where you kind of can't tell where the fictional scripted elements start and where they end. And this film really does an elegant job of like blurring those together in a way where it's kind of impossible. There's like some things that you can know, but there's a lot of things that you really can't untangle, even with the character that Karpovsky plays on screen. And then I remember in the Q&A, apparently this happened in pretty much all of the Q&As he did that year when he was kind of like touring the film around. We were just all asking about the whole. Is it real? Were the final shots real? Where you could see the water through the ice? Did they use a digital effects artist to create that? Is that really the reason that the hole was open? Like, we just had all these questions about the like reality of the hole, and it was just so preoccupying. And he answered none of them. He was like, I don't know, maybe, we'll see. You know, so he was just like very like mysterious about it, and I kind of enjoyed that he preserved the mystery of the little bit of folklore that he was kind of like highlighting in the film. And the DVD commentary does answer some of the questions, but not all of them. So like for those that have seen the film, there's like these kind of penultimate shots of the whole reopening, and it's really beautiful. And we don't know where they come from. Like if you look at the news, like I've looked up like the news articles about the town and the lake, and it doesn't seem to have opened up, but like, where did those shots come from? It's really fun to kind of ponder the mystery of the film. And that's one of the reasons that I love it.
Yeah, when you're talking about blurring reality, when I first found the trailer for this and was watching the trailer, I seriously thought it was a straight up documentary. And then when it does that needle scratch, I was like, oh, okay, that's different.
And there were people, I mean, and this happens, I think, with a lot of pseudo documentaries. I mean, this happened with like Blair Witch. There were people that at some of the screenings who went through the whole screening and thought it was a documentary. The whole thing was a documentary. Like they didn't know, they did something, it didn't quite catch on that Karpovsky was playing a character and that some of this was like a setup. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting too, because like a lot of those Herzog films that come out still get billed as documentaries too, even though like he's talked a lot about how major aspects of those are like scripted and fictional. So who knows how many documentaries actually are, like how common that kind of practice is too.
Yeah, and Herzog is an influence on this film. Like the character that Karpovsky plays, like that's his same name, is a very Herzogian character. Like he kind of devolves into madness through his obsession with reopening this hole in a frozen lake and figuring out what caused it. So it's a good comparison because Herzog is one of the filmmaker touchstones that he's talked about when he does interviews about this film. Yeah.
Yeah. So where can people find this movie? Because I didn't think it was streaming anywhere when I looked.
Yeah, you can basically you can download it from the distributor website. So IndiePix is the distributor, and you can download it to own a digital copy, or you can buy the DVD. But that's pretty much its availability. I couldn't find it even to rent on other platforms. So so it's kind of weird talking about. Has anyone else seen this film?
No, I was gonna ask, do you know any backstory as to why it's such a difficult film? Like is there like licensed music in it or something like?
No, I think it's just, it's Karpovsky's first feature, and his subsequent features, a lot of I think Woodpecker is fairly obscure as well and kind of hard to find. I think it's just one of those things where it's like there's a lot of independent films that are pretty decent that don't get picked up anywhere. It's kind of the reason, like David, you do your Physical Media Ain't Dead, It Just Smells Funny series, because it's a reminder that there's actually quite a bit that's not really widely available, a lot of little gems in our cinema history. As much as it seems like there's an abundance of things to watch on like Criterion and Movie, there's a lot of things that aren't circulating. And this is just one of those ones that I happened to buy I quite liked the film when it came out. I happened to buy the DVD and was very glad that I did, because it's something I can easily revisit now.
Yeah.
I like Jerry Perry's work too. He wrote a book about John Ford, so I didn't know he did the commentary here, and I'm kind of like,
Yeah. So there's a commentary track. So if you are inclined to buy DVDs sight unseen, there's a commentary track on the DVD. So definitely watch it first, just so you can get the narrative and just enjoy that film. But then the DVD, Jerry Perry, there's a few awkward moments. Like it's one of those things where it's been, what is that, 15 years ago? Ooh, was 2006 15 years ago?
Yeah.
I was in grad school 15 years ago. So there's a few little throwaway comments that he makes where you're like, I think probably most 2021 listeners will go like, ooh, don't say that. But the Karpovsky's kind of the way he talks about making decisions in the film and kind of what he was after is really interesting. And I think that's always the best thing of a commentary track, is hearing, the filmmaker talk about their decision-making process.
One endorsement, speaking of Jerry Perry and his love for the film and his champion of it at BU, I noticed that on the critics, the little blurbs, one of them was from Matthew Ross of Filmmaker Magazine. And he actually went on to become a director, and I worked for him for 2 years. and he's like a really great guy. He's got incredible taste in film. So anything that's good for Matt, enough for Matt, is good enough for me. So I'll be checking this out very soon.
Oh, good. I hope this inspires. Yeah, part of it was like, I don't know, like when I was going through my DVD shelves, I was like, I'm gonna pick something out on the DVD, and this was one where I was like, I don't know, not enough people have seen this one. Maybe this will inspire a couple of people to give the download a shot.
Yeah, that's why we're here. All right, so for this next selection, we have Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, whose birthday was just yesterday, and Shirley MacLaine and Vincent Minnelli's Some Came Running.
Look forward to a new dramatic experience based on the second controversial novel by the author of the sensational and memorable From Here to Eternity. This is Parkman, the setting for a bold panorama of adult emotions. And this is Dave Hirsch, who returned to shake loose the sins, the shame, the secrets of an entire town so that it would never be the same. His hometown hadn't changed much in its 100 years, except for one thing. Dave was back, and everyone knew that trouble and women must be close behind. The most dramatic portrayal in Frank Sinatra's fabulous career. His best friend, Dean Martin, a guy who wouldn't take his hat off to anybody.
He always wears his hat in the presence of ladies.
All the time.
He even sleeps in his hat. I'll bet.
I learned a little while back that certain conditions bring a gambler luck, you know? And, oh, thank you. And this here hat's one of them. You know, every time I take this hat off, something bad happens to me. All right, take away the door. Pick it up and put it on his head.
Men fought him, but couldn't whip him. Women loved him, but couldn't hold him.
Dave, be in love with me. Oh, I love you so much. I've never met anybody like you before in my whole life.
This is Ginny, who wanted his love regardless of consequences. A standout performance by Shirley MacLaine.
You'll miss the bestest pal you ever had.
Hey, buddy, get that dame away from the band. Look, I don't want any trouble. Are you going to remove her or are we? What do you mean, are we going to? Dave, if there's going to be an argument about Jimmy singing, I'm with him. Yeah, I'm with him.
Martha Hyer is Gwen, afraid to love him and too attracted by him not to.
Oh, by the way, when's the wedding? What wedding? What wedding? Dave, just between you and me, that little old school teacher of yours, you know, she ain't too good an influence. You know, ever since you give up drinking, you've been impossible. Boy.
Oh, we'll have no more of that. I'm not one of your barroom tarts.
You're right, teacher. You're 100% right. I've been a bad boy. I've been naughty. Matter of fact, I don't even belong in your class.
Yes, everyone knew that Dave was back. The smug folks of the country club set, and the others on the wrong side of the tracks. Some Came Running reveals with startling force the innermost secrets of a town and its people, boldly played by a cast as big as its story.
Dames.
All right, so this was Jack's pick. So Jack, why did you want to recommend this film?
Well, Vincent Minnelli is one of my favorite filmmakers, as I think some of you know, and he's a director who's best remembered now for his musicals that he did for MGM, like Meet Me in St. Louis and The Bandwagon. I love those movies. But I think some of his best movies are also the melodramas that he did, which include films like The Bad and the Beautiful, this film, 2 Weeks in Another Town, Home from the Hill. And the critic Dave Kerr said that Minnelli's melodramas are the opposite of Douglas Sirk's melodramas, because Douglas Sirk is like, his films are really kind of cold and distanced and kind of like modernist in some ways, whereas Minnelli's are just characterized by this excess, you know, both like a stylistic excess and an emotional excess. There's just so much of everything in this movie. And I mean, a stylistic excess above all, really. Like Minnelli said that he styled the movie's visual design off of the inside of a jukebox, which I've always thought was really cool. But yeah, a lot of those later melodramas that he did, like this one, Home from the Hill, he did in CinemaScope. So, I mean, he's just so good at kind of organizing colors and movements within these like widescreen images. It almost reminds me of the way that a classical composer would organize sound. You know, it's just it's so emphatically stylized and unreal. And I find it very beautiful. But at the same time, I think it's a movie that, despite how stylized it is kind of trying to touch something really deep and truthful about people. I guess I should talk about the plot a little bit. The movie is about Frank Sinatra plays a writer, and this is important too because so many of Minnelli's protagonists are artists. Like Lust for Life is about Van Gogh, The Bad and the Beautiful and 2 Weeks in Another Town, which are kind of companion pieces, are about filmmakers. And all of his protagonists, even if they're not artists by profession, are dreamers and kind of creative people who are very disruptive. So Frank Sinatra returns to his hometown, which is a fictional town of Parkman, Indiana, although the film was partially shot in Madison, Indiana, which is kind of cool. He plays a guy named Dave Hirsch, who's a writer who returns to this town after 16 years of being away. And he causes quite a stir because his brother's like the big man in town. He's the rich guy, and him and his brother are very at odds. And so Minnelli basically organizes this film kind of in opposition, where there's this daytime world of like Frank Sinatra's character is dating this school teacher, but then he's also hanging around with Shirley MacLaine's character, who's kind of like a woman of ill repute in the traditional sense. And the daytime scenes and the nighttime scenes almost appear as if they're taking place in two different movies, where like the daytime scenes are like this Peyton Place kind of everyone knows what everyone else is doing. And then the nighttime scenes are like this bright neon, very glamorous. They almost look like proto Mulholland Drive or something. But yeah, it's an interesting movie too, because Shirley MacLaine is really like, even though Frank Sinatra is the lead, I kind of think of Shirley MacLaine as like, this is her movie, because she just gives such a good performance. It's Isabelle Huppert said it's her favorite performance ever, Shirley MacLaine in this movie. And it's definitely my favorite MacLaine performance that I've seen. I just think she plays kind of an uneducated woman, and a woman who is kind of, she just has this quality of almost innocence in a way, where I think that kind of performance is so hard. In a way, it's like, I read a quote one time that said like, playing a comic or a really lighthearted performance is harder than playing Lady Macbeth. There's just something so tough about giving a performance that kind of lighthearted quality. But at the same time, she becomes a tragic figure within the movie. So it's a movie that's, yeah, built on paradoxes like that. The paradox between the nighttime and the daytime world. The paradox of the fact that Shirley MacLaine's character becomes quite tragic. It's also a film that kind of feels, when you finish watching it, you feel like you just read a novel, because, I mean, there's just so much that happens in this movie, and it's so detailed. And I think I'm when I say that the movie's novelistic, I'm not so much talking about its fidelity to the source material, but I'm more so talking about how Minnelli just understands the characters so well that you feel like you've kind of lived with them for a couple of hours. And I think that's really beautiful. I mean, the Edward Yang movie, A Brighter Summer Day, is another movie that I think is novelistic in that same way. It has kind of like this epic sprawl to it that feels really literary. That's something that Minnelli actually does quite well in his melodramas, and it's an aspect of his work that doesn't always come through in the musicals. But I think he's really good with melodramas and with like those kind of heated emotions or elevated states, if you will. This movie kind of feels like being out in the sun too long. Like you just kind of you feel kind of loopy after it.
Yeah, I mean, anything Minnelli does, I think, is pretty magical, to be honest. So you mentioned that it's filmed in Madison. Have you gone there yet?
I don't actually think I've been through Madison.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, you really need to go. My family, it's one of my family's favorite places to go, just because the buildings and everything are really great. But a lot of the buildings and such that you see in the movie are still there. So you can visit that cemetery that's in the movie, and the Ohio Theater is still there and running. And the jewelry store that Arthur Kennedy's character owns has been turned into a bookstore, and it's one of my favorite bookstores to go to. So it's just a really cool place to kind of go there and kind of like step into the movie in a cool way.
I will have to do that at some point. Also, I forgot to mention I don't want to give too much away about the plot or the climax, but the final scenes of the movie are set at a fairground, and the whole town kind of becomes transformed into like this big carnival world. And I mean, it's really like visually the highlight of the movie. It's really where you see what he was talking about with the jukebox design. And it's also, I think, where his handling of like scope framing and that kind of thing is really just so great. I mean, he's using every piece of the film image in a way that's just stunning.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I really felt like I wanted to be like Shirley MacLaine's best friend after watching this. Like, just her character is so like golden, and like just she seems like a lot of fun. You know, like she's the only character in this film that actually seemed like she was having fun at any point whatsoever.
Yeah, she breaks my heart. I mean, the scene where she's with Frank Sinatra and he reads her the story that he got published in the Atlantic, and then she's like, I didn't understand it. And then he gets furious, but then she's like, well, I don't have to understand it or understand you to love you. I think that's like really what the movie's about. I mean, I don't even cry in movies that much. Like I'm not a huge crier, but this movie I just sobbed deeply. And like that scene in particular is one that really gets me. I don't know, I just think it's a beautiful notion, you know. You don't have some of the people that we love the most, we don't always understand.
I was just gonna say on the topic of Shirley MacLaine, because she played so many characters kind of ill repute, like Irma Vep and Sweet Charity, and to an extent The Apartment, not like ill repute, but you know, someone considered, I guess, fast. I don't know, but
kind of a hot mess. She plays a hot mess really well.
Yeah, hot mess. Do you think that is due to like why do you think she's cast that way so often, considering like she is such this kind of like a bubbly, I don't know, when you see Shirley MacLaine, you don't think woman of ill repute. You think like cute, fun, bubbly, like charming smile, like all these things. Like, where do you think that comes from? Like, and why does it work so well?
I think part of it might be the fact that she came up in comedy rather than in drama, because I know one of her earliest performances is in Artists and Models, which Dean Martin's in that too, but it's a Jerry Lewis, Dean Martin vehicle. So I don't know, maybe producers and that kind of thing just thought that giving her a more like fast type of character would be a better vehicle for her to be more comic. She's definitely pretty comic in this movie, which she does quite well, I think.
The way that Laura feels about Shirley MacLaine's character is how I felt about Dean Martin's character Bama. I just loved, he's so confident, he's so fun. The whole running gag where he won't take off his cowboy hat is just great. What do you think would you say this is your favorite of his performances? And if not, what do you think it is about his performance in the movie that makes him so memorable?
I really like him here too. I think my favorite of his performances that I've seen is probably in Rio Bravo, the Hawks movie, which similarly, in Rio Bravo, his character is an alcoholic, of course. And in some ways, Rio Bravo is like low-key a movie about alcoholism. And obviously Some Came Running also is a movie about alcoholism, although, well, I was gonna say, although more so the Frank Sinatra character, but I guess really the Dean Martin character too.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I think he's wonderful. Him and Frank work really well together here. It's just, I love that first introduction to Bama in the bar.
Yeah.
Over the booth, you know?
Oh yeah.
And he just knows immediately that he's got somebody on his side.
Yeah. There's a great shot where he's just reading the story that Dave Hirsch, Frank's character, got published. He's just sitting there just being like, yeah, great story. And just like, I want him in every shot of this movie, just like doing Dean Martin stuff.
Yeah. And I think Arthur Kennedy's a really good actor too, even though his character here is really a schmuck. But he gets the job done.
Yeah.
Yeah. So great movie.
Martha Hyer, I mean, was she, I'm, and this is a legitimate question, was she cast a little against type? Because I guess my association with her was as like the sweater girl, and she's so like stuffy in this movie, but would she play these kinds of roles frequently?
I feel like this is a Michaela Owens question.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I mean, it's kind of in line with what she did. I know her best, Sabrina. So every time she talks, I just think about her as William Holden's fiance from Sabrina. So, but it was kind of in line with what she did. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was gonna say to the audience, if you want to hear about another Dean Martin, Vincent Minnelli movie, I was on the podcast with David and Elizabeth talking about Bells Are Ringing, which
it's a great episode, despite my arch nemesis being on it.
Well, and you were also wrong in saying Dean Martin was the worst Rat Packer.
Look, I'm just saying.
David, no.
Yeah, fight.
David, no.
That's wrong.
That's wrong.
Yeah, Bells Are Ringing is great too. Judy Holliday is so great in that one.
Yes, and it's on the Criterion channel now, so people can check it out if they have the Criterion channel. All right, so got to move on, unfortunately, but so for our next trailer, we have Jesse's pick and one of greatest films ever, Singin' in the Rain.
Singing in the rain, what a glorious feeling, we're happy again. We'll walk down the lane with a happy refrain and singing, just singing in the rain.
Hold it, Dexter! Well, Mr. Simpson, we're really rolling.
Yeah, well, you can stop rolling at once.
Huh?
Don, Lena.
All right, everybody, save it!
Save it. Tell them to go home. We're shutting down for a few weeks.
What?
Well, don't just stand there. Tell them.
Everybody go home until further notice. What is this? Yeah, what's the matter, R.F.?
The jazz singer. That's what's the matter. The jazz singer.
Oh, my darling little mammy, now little mammy, my little
No, this is no joke, Cosmo. It's a sensation. The public is screaming for more.
More what?
Talking pictures. Talking pictures.
Oh, it's just a freak.
Yeah, what a freak. We should have such a freak at this studio. I told you talking pictures were a menace, but no one would listen to me. Don, we're going to put our best feet forward. We're going to make the dueling cavalier into a talking picture.
Beautiful girl, you're a lovely picture. You were meant for me. a fiddle ready for love. I can jump over the moon up above. Fit as a fiddle and ready for love.
I'm singing in the rain, just singing in the rain.
Make 'em laugh, make 'em laugh, make 'em laugh.
Good morning.
Good morning. We've talked the whole night through.
Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Broadway rhythm, it's got me. Everybody dance. Broadway rhythm, it's got me. Everybody dance.
When I hear that happy beat, feel like dancing down the street.
I feel like we just watched the whole movie, which I'm not complaining about. Okay, so although we're just showing one trailer, this month Jesse has actually paired Singing in the Rain with episode 5 of the Polish miniseries Decalogue as part of his own miniseries, which I'm going to be real careful when I say this, Decadonnen.
Perfect.
Thank you. So, Jesse, can you explain what the Decadonnen is and why you've picked those two films?
Of course, Michaela. So I'm very lucky to be friends with this filmmaker named Mark Cousins, who is a great documentarian, a great narrative filmmaker, and he wrote this wonderful article in Sight and Sound, which is a British film magazine called 50 Weeks to Learn Film. And in it, he offers all these different ways you can learn about making movies if you're a young aspiring filmmaker. And my favorite was he recommended watching 10 episodes of Krzysztof Kieslowski's very dark, solemn, but ultimately morally uplifting miniseries Decalogue. And he recommended alternating every episode of Decalogue with a film by Stanley Donen, America's greatest musical filmmaker. Well, one of the greatest musical filmmakers of all time. This one's very sunny and American, and they're full of love and hope. So for the whole year, I'm going to be watching double features of Decalogue episodes and Stanley Donen films. And a bunch of them have different themes, ranging from beginnings to reunions. The last one's about, connected by a narrative thread of stamps. But for this one, which I think encapsulates the spirit of the Decadonnen better than any other pairing I have, I paired Decalogue 5 and Singing in the Rain. And Decalogue 5, in case anyone hasn't seen it, was later expanded into the film, a short film about killing. And it is the most depressing episode of television I have ever seen. Kieslowski and his DP shot it all in these very grim filters that make everything look really green and really gross. And it's just very unpleasant. It's about this this guy who comes to Poland to kill a cab driver. And after he commits this very brutal, realistic, serious murder, he's defended by this very idealistic lawyer. And I won't give too much away, but the events of the episode, which is very anti-death penalty, are so depressing that the lawyer at the end is reduced to just screaming and crying in his car in the Polish countryside. Just the most depressing ending to anything I've ever seen. And I loved going from that shot of him sobbing his eyes out to Gene Kelly, Donald O'Connor, and Debbie Reynolds singing in the rain. And what more can you say about Singing in the Rain? It's a beautiful film, the exact opposite of Decalogue 5 in every way. It's so beautiful. and like, not afraid to dive into surrealism for the musical numbers. It's so bright and colorful and happy, and everyone in it is cheerful and loves what they're doing. And one brief aside, Ray Bradbury, who was one of the greatest sci-fi authors ever, used to say that science fiction is often misunderstood. And the real definition of science fiction is anything that's about the impact of technology upon human lives. And by that reasoning, he argued that Singing in the Rain is a science fiction movie. And I kind of get where he's coming from every time I see it. But on this time, I was really struck by how it's just like a pure ray of sunshine. And to quote one of my very favorite, to quote this meme I like, where Luca Guadagnino says, "This is what I like about cinema. The fact that cinema is rich enough and varied enough that it can contain one of the most depressing things ever. That's a real passionate, futile cry against the death penalty, and the most bright, happy, cheerful musical ever, and a real pan and a real tribute, not just to movies and singing, but to the very emotion of joy. The fact that cinema can contain both things is a sign of how rich it is and how much I love it."
Yeah, well said. I mean, yeah, what is there to say about Singing in the Rain that has, I mean, it's the best. It's absolutely the best. Like, I remember before the first time I saw it, which was years ago, I was thinking, yeah, but can it really like be that good if absolutely everybody loves it and says it's a masterpiece? And then afterwards, I was like, this is the best movie that's ever been made.
Yeah.
I never heard that Ray Bradbury point about it being science fiction, but that's pretty provocative.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it certainly is an example of like Hollywood technology and resources just at its most powerful,
Yeah, I read it in like 3 different history books, like one after the other. And the very last one I read was like some old Hollywood guy who was really close to me. He's like, "Yeah, Ray has this cockamamie theory." And he paused and went, "Actually, he's kind of right." And every time I see it, like every other time, I'm like, oh, he has a really good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jesse, can I ask you what other pairings were in the Decca Donnan series thus far? Just because I know what I would pair with like Decalogue 2, I think.
Oh.
Or 3, no, Decalogue 3. I know what I would pair with Decalogue 3, but I'm curious what other pairings there have been in this series.
I think you'll be surprised by my pairing for Decalogue 3. For people who don't know as much, Decalogue 3 is the closest thing Kieślowski, who's this great, serious Polish filmmaker, ever made to After Hours, which is this very wild, crazy comedy that Martin Scorsese did. It's the only time Kieślowski filmed a car chase. So with that, I paired a movie called Arabesque, which is actually very hard to find, but it's a very weird caper film where Gregory Peck has to go on the run with Sophia Loren. And the only reason that Donnan did it was he was like, all right, I need paycheck and I want to make it really weird with like the style. I want to push my style in a way that had never been pushed before. And if you watch it, he shoots everything like every other scene he shoots from a mirror, like he's filming a mirror showing the scene. It's a very interesting film. Decalogue 1 was also, the theme is beginnings. So it's how do you begin a miniseries and how do you begin a career if you're a young director with dance experience? The answer is you make On the Town. And then Decalogue 2, I'd have to consult my, let me just 1 second. Decalogue 2 was Damn Yankees, because Decalogue 2 is about making a deal with God, and Damn Yankees is obviously making a deal with the devil.
That's great.
Thank you. What would yours have been for Decalogue 3, David?
Same one. Same as the same thing you did.
Donnan's It's Always Fair Weather is typically seen as like his most somber and melancholy musical. So I'm curious to see which Decalogue you'll pair with it, because maybe you'll have to do the most upbeat Decalogue to go with the most like somber Donnan.
Can I tell you which one it is? Because I found a smart way to do it. Okay, the theme is reunions, because Decalogue 7, for those of you who haven't seen it, is about a mother having a certain type of reunion with her daughter. And if It's Always Fair Weather is all about these 3 World War II soldiers, Americans, who vow that they're going to meet up and reunite, I think 5 or 8, 7 years in the same bar. And they reunite, and obviously they've all changed. So for that one, the theme is reunions, and I haven't seen it yet, but I'm very excited for that one.
It's really great.
Thanks. Yeah, I've seen It's Always Fair Weather. I adore it. It's
Oh,
a
yeah,
great film, but I haven't done the pairing yet, which I'm very pumped for.
Cool.
Laura, were you gonna say something?
I don't remember. I think I was going to ask what David's pairing would have been because I was curious. To bring it around to David's pick, though, man, Gene Kelly would have fit in with those boys, wouldn't he?
Oh, so
Beautiful.
wow.
He really knows how to wear a pair of pants.
Yeah, I mean, it's taking me everything to not be like, can we just talk about Gene Kelly's butt on this? But this is a very serious cinema.
Alex Stody did. And so for Alex Stody, it's good enough for us.
I can't, every Gene Kelly movie, I can't not look at the cake. Anyway, what are you saying?
I mean, he kind of wanted you to. His widow has said so.
Okay, good.
Have you seen The Pirate, David?
Not yet. I'm you know, there's all the Manelli. I have to work through my giant stack that I got from the Warner Brothers Archive. I'm so excited.
You are in for something else.
Yeah, he's an absolute snack in that one.
Since we're in the spirit of bringing things back to David and asking him questions, there was one I really wanted to ask you in the beginning of the conversation. You mentioned that, you know, Magic Mike XXL is very different stylistically from, you know, the original. If you had to create a third Magic Mike film that was entirely different in tone and probably more genre, what would you want to pitch?
Oh God. The third movie in a trilogy is always tricky, especially like ones that are like super different from each other. I think this is gonna sound crazy. I think I'd make it the like the marriage movie, the wedding movie. I think Mike's got to get like finally like actually get married. Like, and then he's got to get and it's a movie where everyone comes back, including Matthew McConaughey and the guy I can't remember from the first movie that deals
Alex
drugs.
Pettyfer.
Yes, thank you.
He was in the Alex Rider movies. That's the only way. That's how I know him.
Yeah, but I think like a marriage movie would be good just because in line with these being kind of like secret musicals. I think like having watched things like Bells Are Ringing and I watched You Were Never Lovelier last night. I think that kind of like tit for tat, tete-a-tete would be good for a Magic Mike movie, and it's something that's just a little lighter.
Yeah.
So
Spinoff, Jada Pinkett Smith, the story between when Mike leaves her and when he shows up again.
And you can call, and her name's Rome, so you could literally call it When in Rome.
Where is Soderbergh? We got to get these pictures.
Making direct to HBO Max movies right now with the big cast. Weird guy.
All right, let's move on. Okay, so actually the cinematographer for Singing in the Rain, Harold Rawson, was also the DP for our last film of the evening. It's another MGM musical from the 50s called Dangerous When Wet, starring my girl, Esther Williams.
I got out of bed on the right side, on the bright side, on the light side. I got out of bed on the right side, and I'm having a wonderful day. I got out of bed on the right side, and I'm having a wonderful day. Disappear to. Here, give me your hand. So tired I could die. Been in the water for...
How do you do? Now tell me, what are you doing strolling in the water on a day like this?
Practicing to swim the channel.
A channel swimmer.
How I drink?
Fine, fine.
Hey, she swims pretty good, huh?
Yeah, she's great.
I got out of bed on the right side, on the right side, on the light side. I got out of bed on the right side, and I'm having a wonderful day.
My ma asked me and I told ma I
men. They don't have to look like Pa, but I like men.
They made a girl and gave her charms.
Ain't nature grand? Ain't nature grand? You'll find it never is too late.
Too late, too late. Ain't nature simply great? Although our hair is turning gray.
Understand?
Ain't nature grand? And then they gave me you to love. Ain't nature grand to
So we started with a salacious film and we're ending with a salacious title. So when it came time to choose a film for this event, I knew without hesitation it had to be this one. Because A, I'm obsessed with Esther Williams, as everyone who knows me knows. And B, this year is her centennial in August. So if you don't know who Esther is, as her #1 fan, I am legally obligated to inform you. She was a champion swimmer who starred in a series of films called Aqua musicals. And what fascinates me so much about these films is that they were all geared towards making movies that only one person, only one woman in particular, could make. And Esther just rarely disappoints. The film might be a little but she never disappoints me. Her movies are just like the absolute epitome of escapism, and Dangerous When Wet is, as you could tell from the trailer, is just a complete example of that. The plot's a little bizarre, as most of her movies are. I mean, it's about her and her family. They are dairy farmers who want to like fix up the farm, so they're all health nuts and they all exercise every day, so they decide to swim the English Channel as a way to like raise money for their farm. Don't worry about it, it's just fun. But this film, it makes me absurdly happy. Like as soon as those opening credits roll, I just have this big dumb smile on my face. It just makes me feel so good. The songs are adorable. William Demarest as Esther's father is just so endearing. The swimming sequence with Tom and Jerry, which you saw a little bit of, is absolutely excellent. The actual English Channel race at the end legitimately makes me cry happy tears every time. I just get so wrapped up in the family, guys. And then Fernando Lamas, as her love interest, later became Esther's real life husband. He's great. Esther's leading men usually couldn't keep up with her in the water, which is part of why I love her, because no man was a match for her. And she'd actually have to like discreetly hold up people like Van Johnson and Ricardo Montalban under the water without like anybody knowing. But Fernando Lamas was actually a former champion swimmer himself, which is part of what makes them such a good match. Since I pointed out the film's cinematographer earlier, Harold Rawson, I also have to say that this movie looks so good. It's not like bright and flashy in your face as like a Minnelli film can be, but just the way like Rawson lit things and the way Charles Walters directed it, it brings me like infinite joy. And you don't expect it to look so good. And speaking of Chuck Walters, though, I have to single him out because he is one of my favorite filmmakers. He was easily Esther's best director, and he doesn't get nearly the recognition he deserves. So just want to kind of shout him out. It's just it's
Easter
a perfect...
Parade, right?
What?
He did Easter Parade, right?
Yeah, he did Easter Parade, High Society, Lily.
Did he
So
do Easy to
yeah,
Love?
it's just sorry.
Did he do Easy to Love? When you
Yes, he also
programmed?
did Easy to Love with Esther the same year as this one. So Dangerous in What, it's just a perfect summer movie. It's just amazing. And if you want to see another Esther movie, because this one isn't currently streaming, it's still very much available elsewhere to rent or buy. But if you want to see another Esther movie, I just found out HBO Max has $1 Million Mermaid on there, so you can check that one out. And that's my spiel. I could go on for hours more, but really shouldn't.
I forget the actress's name that plays Esther's mom, but like her dance sequence where she's doing her high kicks and then she does the splits, I was like, oh my God, that is so impressive. I love that woman.
Yeah, Charlotte Greenwood is amazing. She did a lot of cool musicals and stuff, and she did Oklahoma. So she's awesome.
Yeah, when you programmed Easy to Love, that was my first Esther movie and loved it. So I want to see more. I haven't seen this one, but I want to see more with her, and also more that Charles Walters directed, now that you say that.
Yeah, Chuck Walters, he really got short shrift, but he did so, like when you look at his filmography, you're like, oh my, I love that movie, I love that one, I love that one. And there's a really good biography about him by Brent Phillips that I really highly recommend, because it really gets at like what made him a special director and what differentiated him from others. And it's things you wouldn't really pick up on if you just watched his films. So it's really good.
Cool.
Okay, so I think it's time for our Q&A portion since Brittany popped back up.
I wasn't going to stop you from talking about Esther, so only if you're at a good stopping point.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, there might be some, I think you'll get to talk about her some more, I think, as hopefully everyone will their picks.
I'm wearing
right.
my Ask Me About Esther Williams buttons, so.
All right. David asks, I know it was touched on a little bit when talking about the film, but David, what are the aspects that you think make up a modern musical? Also, how many watches of Magic Mike did it take to make that musical connection?
As far as how many watches it took to make the musical connection, I think it was, let me just rope this right in. It was when I saw it at the same time as Brittany Danielle Friesner at the AMC 12. We were three people in that theater. We did not really know each other at this point, but I did recognize her. Just remember basketball shorts and hair. I was like, I think that's the lady from the IU Cinema, like whispering to my friend. And then she sat by herself in the front row and had a great time.
Yes, I did. I was not going to let anyone ruin that movie for me. I needed to go alone. I needed to sit as far away from other people as possible. And it was a perfect experience.
So I would say like the third time is when like the musical connections started connecting. I don't know if there was like a moment. I think it might have been, I was thinking a lot about Singing in the Rain in the last sequence of Magic Mike XXL when they're at the convention, and it's kind of these both like thematically appropriate but disparate musical sequences all kind of happening in a row. It reminds me a lot of the like gotta dance sequence at the end of Singing in the Rain. And like I was like, and then it all kind of made sense to me. And as far as like what makes up a modern musical, that's like a really good question, because the musical's been dead for all intents and purposes for like the past like, I don't know, like 20 years at this point. Like it's hard to like kind of like figure that out. Like I'm very excited about In the Heights coming out. Like modern musicals on screen are different than modern musicals on Broadway. Obviously, Lin-Manuel Miranda has been doing his best, and there's obviously things like Slave Play and Hadestown and all these things. And so I would like to see those get translated to screen at some point to, maybe, after In the Heights get pushed, maybe take us into whatever the modern movie musical would be. But as far as like movie musicals made for the movies, I don't really have a good answer for what would make that up. I just think this is very modern sensibilities in that it's not calling attention to the fact that it's a musical. And I think that's like pretty modern sensibility, just kind of playing things low key.
Well, musicals live on. They're just in animated cinema or in Disney's terrible live action live
remakes. Yeah.
remakes, shot for shot remakes of their old animated musicals, which are
Yes, correct. And like in the 90s, like
wonderfully
that's
filmed.
that's where musicals ended up where was in animation. But like I kind of struggle thinking of like outside of like some art house things, like mainstream musical hits from the past 20 years.
Disney films, Frozen.
Yeah, pretty much.
La La Land.
La La Land is
La
pretty
La
much
Land,
it's
yeah.
pretty much the only one, and even then that's like, you know, an amuse bouche of like, you know, Jacques Demy and old Hollywood films. So
So
you
it's
know,
great.
yeah, I mean, depending on who you ask, I like that movie, but I get crap for it all the time.
I
So
love that movie, so you will not get crap from me, sir.
No, on that one.
I mean, Moulin Rouge comes to mind too, even though that's like 20 years old now. But
yeah, and you know, the jukebox musical, I feel like that's probably the closest thing to like hits we get as far as like modern musicals, just like musicals with other soundtracks. But and in the way, this is kind of a jukebox musical. There's no original song, although I think it has kind of claimed Pony as its own, like pretty much. So, but I don't want to hog up all the time.
Ava asks, for the room, but with Michaela's expertise noted, what other old Hollywood actors do you think are proto-himbos? And someone please explain for maybe those who don't know in the audience what a himbo is.
Can I explain a himbo and then Michaela answer?
Absolutely. Go.
A himbo, it's 3 prongs. They have to be attractive in a, you know, usually a masculine way, like built in some way. They have to be kind and they have to be dumb. They must be all 3 of these things to qualify as a himbo. Just being good looking and kind just makes you a good man, and being dumb and you know what, like they have to have all 3 prongs. So Michaela.
I was trying to think, and the only one that's coming to mind right now is Rock Hudson, but I wouldn't call him dumb. He was perceived as dumb, but he definitely wasn't, and that's why I have such a friggin' problem with Ryan Murphy's Hollywood. He was not dumb. So
is Ralph Bellamy cute enough to be a himbo? Because he's got the dumb and nice part down in his
yeah, like 30s Ralph Bellamy. Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah,
someone's asking about Troy Donahue.
Oh, Elena. Yeah, I could see that.
Or Tab Hunter.
Yes, Tab Hunter.
Tab Hunter fits.
I like that. Yeah, Tab Hunter.
Well, if you think of more, Michaela, or anyone, just pepper them throughout. There's never too many himbos.
Reg Park, who was a total like he was really a bodybuilder more than he was an actor, but he's in like, if you've ever seen like Mario Bava's Hercules in the Haunted World, he plays Hercules. He's total himbo vibes.
That just made me think of Harry Hamlin in Clash of the Titans.
Yeah.
All right, next question. Colveen asks, what makes musicals such a staple for American movie culture?
I mean, for me, it's just they're fun. They're a great way to escape. I mean, there's nothing that makes me happier than watching a musical. I mean, yeah, that's all I got.
Well, they really lend themselves to like Hollywood, like classic Hollywood industrial production, because you can have this kind of there's a bit of a formula there where you can like plug things in and it stands up to collective authorship in a way. That like if the story had to be perfectly cohesive, because musicals give some flexibility to the story. It doesn't have to all make sense. It just has to be spectacle and, you know, fun.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, when you think about like Esther's movies, she writes in her autobiography, like, didn't I already play this character? Didn't I already do this plot? Like, this is all just the same thing over and over and over. But it's what people wanted, and it's what makes people feel good. And when you have the talent, when you have people like the Freed unit, the Arthur Freed unit at MGM, which is like Charles Walters, Vincent Minnelli, Stanley Donen, you have Betty Comden and Adolph Green there to write music and lyrics and scripts and stuff. When you have the talent there, you've got to exploit it. I mean, it's just, you can't ignore that.
Also, just like a genre that speaks to like the physicality of cinema. I mean, just like its capacity to record like bodies doing things, which I think somewhat kind of makes it akin to like kung fu movies, and it's just like interest in recording the human body and like human athleticism. So I kind of think that in that sense, it's kind of what movies were made for, or at least a genre that is very specific to like like the capacity of the cinema. You know.
That's
Bill,
interesting. Do you think it's sorry, I'm stepping on you, Jesse. Go ahead.
no, you go, Laura.
I was just wondering, like, from that point, like, do you think that like the musical, because we know it's kind of fallen out of favor, has it been replaced by other kind of like genres celebrating the body, like action films, or like now we have a lot of superhero films? Like, do they perform? Do any of you think they perform kind of a similar function?
My take on that is actually, and not just for my bias, I don't know if there's anything like musicals that focus on the body currently that people are as into. I would say musicals have almost been subsumed by anime, just because, in my opinion, anime is this thing where the action on screen and the heightened sense of it is so in line with what like the escapist nature of what musicals is. And a lot like in musicals or kung fu movies, a lot of the, like, when things hit an emotional peak, that is when like the action starts, and it's a lot more abstract. Like anime is a lot of abstraction, which is a lot what musicals are. Like West Side Story is such an abstract musical from beginning to end. And I feel like anime kind of occupies the same space where the action on screen is not to be taken completely literal, but it's, filmed with such a like vibrance to it that I think that's what younger people have attached onto, and that's what's kind of taken the place of musicals, in my humble opinion.
I would argue that action movies and musicals not have a symbiotic relationship, but they very much feed off of each other, particularly action movies. Like a lot of the great Hong Kong action directors of the 80s are very big Gene Kelly fans. They're huge fans of MGM musicals. John Woo, one of the great directors of that era, he's a very big fan of The Umbrellas of Cherbourg. So I would argue that I feel like action movies do a lot of what musicals do, where like, they have these big, set pieces that are full of excess and they're a lot of fun to watch. But, in action movies, it can be very much, more violent as opposed to musicals, which are more focused on singing and dancing. I personally feel like musicals are coming back. Speaking of jukebox musicals, Baby Driver was a jukebox musical that did very well. Dear Evan Hansen is coming out soon, and In the Heights is coming out this week. So the Broadway to Hollywood pipeline is getting a little bigger. So I feel like it's not entirely gone yet. I feel like it's making a bit of a resurgence, but I'm very curious about the next 10 years if there's still going to be effective counter programming for studios that don't have superhero properties like Disney does.
Someone asks, how do you think that compares with concert films like Jonathan Demme's Stop Making Sense?
I'm a very, very big Stop Making Sense fan. I saw it for the first time at the IU Cinema. It was like my go-to movie during quarantine. I would say that that's a musical because very much for the reason that like every number, moves the story along. It doesn't really so much have a plot. I personally, when I would watch it sometimes, I would imagine someone brings the talking heads into a room. They go, okay, talking heads, you have to put on the best concert ever or somebody's going to destroy the world. And then for me at the end, when everyone's singing and you see the audience dancing and jumping up and down, you're like, oh, the talking heads did it. But for me, I personally think concert films, when done right, can be musicals, even if they don't have a plot per se, if they're using musical numbers to tell a type of story and to move, the narrative of the evening along. That would be my own personal argument, is I feel like concert films are a very specific subgenre of musicals, but are in fact musicals.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, Stop Making Sense, Sign of the Times, Jazz on a Summer's Day, Wattstax all have these like kind of, invisible narratives woven throughout them. Like even something like a part of a concert documentary like Otis Redding's performance in Monterey Pop almost has this like arc as you build to him like singing Try a Little Tenderness, and it's like the camera ran out of footage, so then it's intercut with footage of like the like women from around the festivals as he's like talking about like, try a little tenderness to the women in the miniskirt dresses, and like then that itself becomes like this narrative about like the free love movement and like the neglect of women during it. And it's just, and it's very subtle. And so, yeah, I definitely agree with that, Jesse.
Thank you, David. And one last thing about Stop Making Sense. I also just realized it's the story of David Byrne making a lot of friends, because like, he's out there alone, and then, Tina Weymouth comes out, and then Chris Franz comes out. He's got some more friends, and he just keeps building his friend base out as he's performing. So that's another little narrative you can find in Stop Making Sense.
It's also just about Tina Weymouth just looking cool.
Oh yeah, 100%.
All right, since this is a feature-based that we're sharing trailers, David asks, I'm curious on whether you all prefer less plot in trailers or would rather have a too long didn't watch version of the film presented in the trailer.
Less plot, less plot, less plot. My favorite trailer, not of all time, that's an over-exaggeration, but one of my favorite trailers is the District 9 trailer, a trailer that uses no footage from the actual movie, but you get the vibe immediately. It's just an interrogation of one of the aliens, and you kind of know what you're like, oh, that's what this movie is going to be like a little bit. And so, very big fan of like less plot in trailers.
I agree. I don't really watch trailers because I like to go into the movies fresh. And so I don't know. I tend to avoid them when possible.
Same. I only watch them if I'm like at a screening and I see them. But yeah, I mean, even my trailer tonight, I was like, I only sent it in because it was like the only Some Came Running trailer I could find. But I was like, this is kind of long.
Yeah, mine too. It was the only one I could find, and it's not really high quality, but there it is. Yeah.
I prefer less plot, just like, David and the rest of you were saying, more something to just set a mood. But my favorite kind of long, but not really trailer was the Last Night in Soho trailer. Because I thought at first like, oh, that gave away everything. And then I realized, oh, it didn't. I have like more questions. So for me, a good trailer that can deploy plot effectively to generate more questions than it's actually, giving answers to is something I think can work in the right circumstances.
Yes. I also just like trailers that just give you the vibe of the movie. Like, another 2015 movie, Mad Max Fury Road, the second trailer, where it's just like you get the sense of this movie is like, there's a lot of action in it. It's going to be kind of funny. It's going to be kind of zany at the same time. It's going to be kind of sad. Like, it just gives you the emotions of what the movie is going to be and not so much what the actual story will be.
Upstream trailer had Upstream Color. Can't talk. Had a good trailer in that regard. It was very just like, of course, that film has a very like opaque plot anyway, but it really just is like, here's the visual tone of the film, the emotional tone of the film. Yeah, it's a good trailer in that regard.
Yeah, Orson Welles trailers are always like almost like little standalone movies. The F for Fake trailer, which is on the Criterion DVD of F for Fake, if you want to watch it, it's really nothing like the movie. It's just like Orson Welles making another movie.
The Citizen Kane trailer is a lot like that too. I don't think there's a single frame of footage from the actual movie, or not really, but it's very much like a home movie cut as a trailer. It's really funny.
All right, I think we have time for a couple more. Will asks, hard to find media was talked about earlier. So what was the last movie you couldn't find? I had to dig through my dad's old DVD collection to be able to watch Peter Jackson's Dead Alive, Brain Dead.
I feel like,
I mean, with old Hollywood, there's always like some movie you're trying to find that you just can't get your hands on. I mean, for the longest time, there's this movie, I wrote about it on the blog a year or so ago, called Take a Letter, Darling. And it has Rosalind Russell playing this like ad executive who hires Fred McMurray to be her secretary, which just that plot line alone, I was like, I have to see this film. And so I finally found it like years later on some site I won't mention, and loved it. It was great. So that's always the nice thing, is when you finally find it and it's exactly what you wanted it to be.
Anyone else have one that stands out?
Have you guys ever seen the Disney movie, The Three Caballeros?
I have, yes. Yeah. I think it's cool.
When I was a kid, I went to Blockbuster like every week, and you know how they would have the plastic card that had the movie poster behind the actual DVD? Well, it was just that, and I could only see that, but the movie was never there. And I begged my mom to take me like every week to get this movie, and it was never there. And then so finally, I asked my mom if she would ask the people who worked at Blockbuster where it was, and they were like, "Oh, somebody just never brought it back. Like, we need to take the poster down." And then so like years later, when I was like in 4th or 5th grade, I found it at this like secondhand store. I found a VHS of it, and that to this day remains like one of those movies where it had this like mythical status in my mind because I couldn't see it for so many years. And then when I finally saw it, I was like, this is one of the best movies I've ever seen.
My version of that, Jack, was there's this great Orson Welles movie called Chimes at Midnight, where the rights were unavailable for a very long time. When I was a kid, I was going to go up to this theater in Pleasantville called the Jacob Burns Film Center, where they have great education programs that taught me how to make movies, and they have like great programming and these beautiful screens. And they had to cancel the screening because the rights holder wouldn't let them do it. And for like, I think 4 or 5 years, I tried to find it everywhere, and I just couldn't find a good enough copy. I could have like sent away to Brazil, but like it just didn't seem like a good idea. But finally, I found an old VHS in the IU's library. And I remember vividly watching it in the basement and being really excited to like finally be seeing it. And then lo and behold, the next semester, the IU Cinema showed it as a part of the Orson Welles Centennial. And I just remember just being really emotional watching it on the big screen, just being like, wow, this is amazing. And if any of you are interested in it, it's available on the Criterion channel. And it's also out on Blu-ray and DVD on Criterion. So Chimes at Midnight is finally available to watch.
That's one of the best movies ever.
Yeah. I did just think of another one just because I have Esther on my brain. Her last movie ever is not available anywhere, and it makes me extremely sad. It's a Spanish production. Fernando Lamas directed it and starred in it with her. And I can't find anything for it. I can't even find film stills. I finally bought just this year like Spanish versions of the lobby cards. So I have these little like lobby cards with like some film stills on it, and that's like all I know about the movie, all I've seen of it, and I'm extremely sad about that.
It's like a Theta Bara film. It's just gone.
Mine is Andrei Zulawski's Possession. The same group of boys who went and saw Magic Mike XXL with me. We all lived in the same house together my senior year of college, and we watched lots of movies together. And the only thing you could find was this crappy out of print DVD that was like a double-sided disc that was like a midnight double feature thing with Andrei Zulawski's Possession and a Mario Bava movie called Shock. That was like $80 to buy, and you cannot stream this movie, but this kind of underground boutique distro called Mondo Vision, like 4 years were like, we have the rights to all of Andrei Zulawski's films, and we will be putting them out. And not a joke, I think every week one of us would like be on our computers and then shout to the rest of the house, be like, it's not out yet, because we would constantly check the website to get like this Blu-ray. And after 4 years, it finally got released, but we had all moved to different places. But I just remember getting that text message in the text group that just said, it's out. And I knew exactly what they meant. And like me and everybody else like ran to our computers to order it because it was like limited edition of like 2,000 copies. And so that also screened at the IU Cinema years ago, I think 2014 as
that
a
was the
midnight movie.
No, I think it was 2013 because I'm pretty sure it was the first midnight movie I worked.
Yes, and like the same group of boys and a bunch of other people drove into town to watch this movie at the IE Cinema. That's how like much of a holy grail movie it was.
Nice. All right, well, last question. David asks, you all have been great contributors to IU Cinema's blog. I swear I didn't write this. And your posts have brought perspective to films that are insightful and fascinating. What about IU Cinema makes you come back year after year to produce, the blog, to produce such great content?
It's fun to write about movies.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fun.
We have to push ourselves on other people.
Do you find it hard to, I guess maybe a better question might be, do you find it, and I know the answer, but do you sometimes find it hard to find the right thing to write about? Or the thing that speaks to you at a certain time? Or do you just have a list that you're like, yeah, this time I'll write about this one?
Yeah, I have a running list.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes what I'm thinking about in terms of cinema isn't like necessarily what's going on with the programming. So I'm like, well, this movie stars Robert Ryan too, and I'll write about this movie, you know?
Yeah, I don't think I ever struggle with that because the IU Cinema's programming is so wide and varied, which is nice. It's not very samey. And the way my brain works is I'm constantly, as you can see, making connections between Singing in the Rain and Magic Mike XL. I'm always making connections between things, so it's never hard for me to find something to write about. It's more hard to find the will to write at any given moment.
The time, that's the difficulty, not the idea.
Yeah, the programming's so rich, and even, you know, it's embarrassment of riches both in the archive and any given semester to pick something. But even beyond that, to go back to the original question, I loved working at the IU Cinema and going to see movies there so much. And I do not live in Bloomington anymore, and I love coming back, but you know, you can't do that all the time when you live, you know, primarily in LA now. So it's been a really wonderful link to IU, both the cinema and the school in general, to like, you know, see what's playing and, you know, write a piece. And, you know, it still feels, you know, very much like, you know, I'm in the IU family. And yeah, it's been a really great connection to the IU Cinema. So that's been really fun.
Yeah, to answer the original question as well, I mean, the cinema is my home. I've been going there since 2011. I'm very precious and protective of it, and I like engaging the community in the best way I can. And writing just happened to be the chosen way. Writing and podcasting have been the chosen ways I've decided to do that. And I just like taking all this dumb information that I've collected over the years because like to look at my computer and books so much and listen to other people talk about movies. And I just want to relay that to as many people as I possibly can.
Yeah, and even though sometimes it can feel like what you're writing is just going out into a void that no one will ever like read it or care or anything, it's still like you still feel like I need to write this. I have to write this for myself sometimes. And also, yeah, IU Cinema's the best. And why wouldn't we want to write for that, for them, the place? My brain is slowly going, guys.
It's still your CPU in the background still trying to think of more himbos. Well, I have to say you've all knocked it well out of the park for what we envisioned when we came up with the idea for the blog with our founding blog editor Barbara Ann O'Leary. So thank you all for your continual extraordinary contributions and insights. That's our event. Do you have any closing thoughts you'd like to share, as this is our last event of the spring season as well?
I guess I just wanted, you know, to say obviously thank you to the audience for watching. You know, we have an incredible team of bloggers, and I really can't thank them enough for adapting this past year and continuing to create thoughtful work during a time when creativity has been a real struggle. So, and you know, the same goes for my IU Cinema coworkers. I'm really proud to be part of this place, obviously, and I'm just glad we could end the semester on a fun note.
For those in Bloomington, I can't wait to see you at the cinema this fall. It's going to be awesome.
I just can't wait to go back to the movies. I just miss everybody so much. It's been a tough year, but like Michaela said, we've all adapted really well, and I've got a lot of opportunities because of the pandemic that I wouldn't have probably had time for before the pandemic. So you know, mixed blessings and all that, but like I'm very happy with the work we've done this past year, and I love everyone here, honestly. And it's I hope someday we can all be in the cinema at the exact same time, a thing that I don't think has happened ever.
I think so. But yeah, I mean, on a similar note, like I've just resumed kind of going to screenings again, which like has always been such an important part of my movie going life. Like I really like seeing movies with other people as opposed to just watching everything at home, which I've had to do this year. But just like seeing the turnout, at least up here, people seem very ready to go back to the cinema, in person again. And that's very moving to me. So, as I'm sure it is to you guys too.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the rejuvenation of cinema, and I've loved especially going to movies for hear like great audience reactions, and I'm looking forward in the coming months to hearing some good ones in the future.
Yeah, we just did our annual audience survey, and I was rejuvenated, I guess, maybe not exactly the right word, but how many people we were saying, what's your biggest concern about returning? And like the cinephiles we have in our audience, it was quality of films. Like, I want to make sure you're playing awesome stuff, and I can't wait for that again. So I was like, great, awesome. People are ready to get back. So, well, thank you all, Michaela, Jesse, David, Laura, and Jack, for a truly delightful and engaging way to close out IU Cinema's spring season. And thank you to all of you at home for your thoughtful questions tonight. I'd like to thank the entire IU Cinema team for another wonderful event and for all their blood, sweat, and tears this entire academic year. And I'm going to name every single one of you. Thank you, Jessica, Elena, Seth, Kyle, Carla, Michaela, Alyssa, Elizabeth, David Carter, David Cordes, Ava, Will, Mary, and Peyton. I cannot thank you all enough for your dedication, tenacity, and good humor in coming together this year as a team to continue bringing our community together through transformative cinematic experiences. As I said at the top of the show, this is our final event of the season, and our team will be spending the next few weeks focusing on preparations for our fall 2021 season, and yes, our return to events inside IU Cinema. We're still working through many of the details on what our events will look like in our new reality, but no, we are very excited to welcome you back to our place for film. Please stay tuned to our website, our weekly email, and our social media channels, our podcast, and our blog for more information. To all of you tuning in tonight and this entire season, thank you once again for supporting us. As always, we hope you will each please take care of yourselves and be kind and generous to others. We look forward to seeing you all again soon. Have a great night.